Welcome back to Close Up, where we are still in the getting to know you phase with the top Republican candidates for Congress. This morning, we welcome back Tim Baxter, who is running in CD1. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me again, Adam.
So you're a state rep. You fought hard for your bill to audit the 2020 election, but it was voted down this last week. Obviously, Democrats were never on board, but were you surprised by how much resistance you got from Republicans?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was very unfortunate. Election integrity is one of the most important things in the state, and elections are ultimately the cornerstone of our democracy. And my bill is a common sense bill. It was free for taxpayers, and it would have made sure that every single voter in this state had nothing less than full transparency with our elections. And I don't know why we didn't have 400 votes for this, let alone all the Republicans. So it was very unfortunate, but I was proud to fight for a full forensic audit in this state. Donald Trump, it was one of his biggest priorities was to audit the election of New Hampshire's 2020 results, and I was proud to fight for that.
So the point these Republicans make, when they were arguing against your bill was it's time to move forward. 2 decades ago, when Democrats were really frustrated over the loss of Al Gore and they had supported that Gore-Lieberman ticket, I remember there was the insult that was hurled, sore loserman instead of Gore-Lieberman, right? So hasn't this entered sore loserman territory for Donald Trump at this point?
Well, to be clear, this bill was not about who won or who didn't win the 2020 election. It was about making sure that we had full transparency for our election results. And let's talk about what happened. We have the Secretary of State, the former Secretary of State, saying towns in New Hampshire broke the law, that Windham, New Hampshire broke the law. So, of course, there is reason enough to audit our elections. And what's funny, Adam, is the reasoning against the audit bill changed. At first it was, well, it's going to cost millions of dollars. Then I made sure to take care of that with writing the bill. I took into consideration their arguments. And then the argument changed to, well, we want to move forwards, not backwards. And so if your argument is, well, we might not like the results that the audit produces, that's unacceptable to the people of the state. They have a right to know what's going on with our elections, and I was proud to fight for it.
This Canadian trucker convoy that's going on to our north there, blocking up Ottawa and other areas there. Someone who endorsed you, U.S. Senator Rand Paul, said he'd like to see that happen here in the United States. Do you think that's something that should happen here in the U.S.? Do you want to see those kind of protests?
Well, let me just say I'm proud to have the support of Senator Rand Paul. He's a fighter for freedom, and we've got in Senator Rand Paul, the National Association for Gun Rights, Congressman Thomas Massie, all within the past 2 weeks. So our campaign is surging, and one of the top issues with Senator Paul right now that he's been fighting for is medical freedom and pushing back against Dr. Fauci, something I've been pushing for as well. I think what's happening in Canada is a byproduct of their tyrannical government right now. And truckers, obviously, they are the backbone of really the infrastructure of any country. And so I think it really highlights why our policies in our governments, whether that's Canada or the United States, should support medical freedom. It's something I've led the fight for here in New Hampshire and will in Congress.
So if a bunch of truckers decided to converge on downtown Manchester, shut down transportation there over frustration with vaccine mandates, would you be cheering them on?
Sure. Look, if there's people that are protesting for medical freedom, I'm going to support their right to protest, and I'm in support of medical freedom. So I think we should absolutely be in support of medical freedom without a doubt.
One of the frustrations a lot of conservatives have right now with the situation in Canada, they wanted to send some of these people money. That's being shut down by GoFundMe and other groups. Big tech is obviously an issue. Both sides of the aisle have frustration with some of those companies.
Yeah.
What should be done to rein in big tech?
Well, I think for starters, we need to understand that we need to change the way big tech is regulated. These companies are not acting like publishers. They're not acting like platforms where they're allowing content to just be published. They are themselves deciding which content they want to have on their platform, and they're censoring political speech, conservatives. And so we need to change the way big tech companies are regulated. I think also conservatives, we shouldn't use platforms of people that hate us. That's something that Rand Paul talks about all the time. So I think GoFundMe, they have a long history of shutting down fundraisers for groups that just don't agree with, liberal worldviews. So I think, one, we should just stop using GoFundMe.
So using government power to change how a business works, that doesn't sound very conservative.
But to be clear, I'm not saying that we should change how the business works. I'm saying we should change how big tech is regulated, because if you look at Section 230, big tech is not operating in a way that they're supposed to be regulated in that way. Right? If you're going to operate as a social media company that says everyone is allowed to publish what they want, you get one set of regulations. But if you're not actually operating in that way, then why should we give you that tremendous leeway? That's the problem, is we've got to change that regulatory framework if these companies are not actually going to allow everyone to have free expression of ideas.
New Hampshire believes in local control, especially when it comes to education. So if an elected school board wants to adopt a curriculum that involves something like critical race theory, why should the state, at the state level, be stepping in to stop them?
Well, it's a great question, Adam. And number one, I would say that we've got, and this was a big wake-up call to parents around the state, we've got students that are being taught, and this is being subsidized by taxpayer money, that someone is bad just because of their race, or that someone will never have an opportunity to succeed because of the color of their skin. And that is very, very harmful. And taxpayer money shouldn't be subsidizing this hate. So ultimately, right, in New Hampshire, we've got the local and the state government that is funding education. So ultimately, we have to step in and make sure critical race theory isn't being taught in our public schools. And that's something that I've been a 100% supporter of, making sure we stop critical race theory being subsidized and taught with taxpayer money in New Hampshire.
When it comes to education, one of the biggest concerns for parents is the cost of college and getting a higher education. So do you have a plan to deal with that issue?
For higher education, well, number one, excuse me, Adam, still getting over a cold here, feeling much better. But when it comes to higher education, we've had the federal government that's been subsidizing this sort of predatory student loans for decades. And what's happened is the cost has gone higher, higher, and higher for decades. So number one, the federal government needs to get out of that business. That's when you're going to see the costs go dramatically down over time. But until we deal with that issue, you're not going to see a sizable reduction in the cost of college education.
You're a Seacoast guy. Governor Sununu, in his State of the State this last week, said offshore wind is happening. That's going to be a reality in New Hampshire. Some people worry about some environmental impacts, potentially visual impacts. What's your perspective on this as a Seacoast resident? Should offshore wind be coming to New Hampshire?
Well, look, if we want to have offshore wind or more green energy, that's fine. But let's get back to what the number one issue really is in New Hampshire right now and around this country. It's the dramatically high cost of gas, energy, and we need to be energy independent. Look, there is a cost to CO2 and fossil fuels. I absolutely agree with that. But we first and foremost need to make sure that people can heat their homes that are struggling in New Hampshire. And we don't see our federal representation that's adequately dealing with this high cost of inflation and high cost of energy. So we need to make sure that we are energy independent, that we have sane policies from the Biden administration, and that we're fighting for fiscal sanity first and foremost. One of the things I've worked on as a state rep in New Hampshire was our conservative state budget. We cut every major tax. We were the only state in the country that cut spending. That is such an antithesis to what's going on in Washington right now, where they are spending endless money, printing endless money. Until we have people that understand fiscal sanity in Washington, we're never going to get our energy costs under control. And that's the number one issue when it comes to the environment or energy, is making sure people can afford energy.
We got time for one more quick question here. Matt Mowers was the nominee in 2020. Some people think he should be given another shot. This is a crowded field. You're competing against him. Why not Matt Mowers?
Well, I'm running for Congress because I want to completely annihilate the swamp. And there's corruption on both sides in Washington right now. And I'm a proven conservative fighter. I've fought for forensic election integrity here in New Hampshire. I've fought against illegal immigration. I've led that fight. I've led the fight against vaccine passports in New Hampshire. I'm the only candidate that's a proven conservative fighter in this race, and that's why I'm asking for your vote.
All right, Tim Baxter, a candidate in CD1. Thanks for joining us on Close Up.
Thanks for having me.